Most popularly known as Apocalypse's wife, Genesis first appeared in the X-Men/Dark Ages and gave birth to the beings who came to be known as the first Horsemen. She ruled over the historic mutant land of Okara by Apocalypse's side, and she could be best identified by the blue markings on her head. She bravely led the mutants in their battles and eventually stepped up to be the leader of Amenth. She was worthy enough to wear the golden helm of annihilation and wield unimaginable power, and today we shall explore her origins and tell you all about her. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Exploring the origins and backgrounds of Genesis. As Apocalypse's wife, Genesis helped him rule over Okara and gave birth to 4 children who became known as the Horsemen of Apocalypse. These children were most commonly known as pestilence, war, famine, and death, and they were bestowed with magnificent powers with the aid of Apocalypse's celestial technology. After their birth, their land of Okara was targeted by the Amenthi Daemons, and Genesis stepped up to protect and lead the mutants. They were on the verge of defeating the Amenthi when the Dark Elder God of Amenth, Annihilation, showed up and suggested a peace treaty. However, Annihilation stated that the treaty would come into effect only if Genesis passed a test, which she did without battling an eyelash. However, she did not agree with the treaty's conditions and turned Annihilation's offer down. Their war continued, and the mutants had better chances at winning it until Genesis' sister, Iska, the Unbeaten, betrayed them and sided with the Amenthi Daemons. Iska was an extremely powerful being, and her betrayal was a massive blow to the mutants, who realized that they could not win anymore. A part of Okara, known as Arako, was then sealed off into Amenth along with all the mutants so that they could try and hold the Amenthi demons at bay. While Genesis led these mutants on Arako, Apocalypse stayed on Earth to start a new society of mutants that could ward off these demons when they returned at a later date. Some of her major story arcs in the Marvel Universe. Genesis' impact on the mutants at Arako. After Genesis was sealed off in Amenth, along with Okaran mutants, she decided to build Arako and erect towers to help them defend themselves against the Daemons. Genesis ruled over Arako for millennia with the Great Ring of Arako and defeated the Daemons on numerous occasions. When the High Mutant Prophet Idel, predicted they would be defeated, Genesis refused to accept his word and strengthened their forces to the extent that she eventually got rid of the Amenthi Daemons' threat forever. It took Genesis several years to accomplish this, and her contribution to these battles was monumental. As they dived deeper into Amenth, Genesis' forces faced the White Sword and his 100 champions and were quite surprised to see him alive. The White Sword had sacrificed himself during the Daemons' initial attacks and was believed to be dead for a long time before they encountered him. However, the years of isolation had taken a toll on him, and he tried to attack Genesis and force them to return to Arako. As Genesis retreated to Arako, she found her sister Iska waiting to hand her an invitation from Annihilation. She accepted the invite and paid him a visit to the Hall of Annihilation. She was shocked to learn that they had been breeding daemons with captive mutants to create a superior race of hybrid warriors. Once again, Annihilation brought up his peace treaty, but Genesis refused to comply and fought with him. Genesis defeated the Elder God and severed his connection with the Golden Helm of Annihilation. By severing the helm's ties to its leader, Genesis ended up leaving the Amenthi horde without a leader, and they went feral and tried to consume everything or die in the process. They lacked control without someone to lead them and launched an attack on Arako while Genesis was still held captive in the Hall of Annihilation. For about 100 years, Genesis refused to claim Annihilation's helm while the Amenthi tried to break through the walls of Arako. At this point, the mutants attempted to open a gateway to transport them to Dryador in Otherworld. After only realizing that everything they had built was lost, Genesis finally decided to wear the Golden Helm and help the Daemons control themselves. However, she failed to exert control over the helm and fell victim to Annihilation's possession. Under his control, she was compelled to capture Arako and proceed to invade the Otherworld as well as Earth. Her story arc during X of Swords. After Genesis brought Arako under control, Annihilation commanded her body to declare an assault on Dryador and also send her grandson to Krakoa. She asked him to meet Apocalypse and somehow trick him into opening a portal route to the other world, as this would enable the Amenthi Daemons to access Earth. This plan was executed to perfection, and it resulted in the destruction of Dryador, while Apocalypse was once again reunited with children. However, the 4 Horsemen were now under Annihilation's control, and they tried to kill him until these actions caught the eyes of the Otherworld's ruler. Saturnine intervened and forced them into declaring a ceasefire, after which she suggested they arrange for a tournament to decide who wins. She offered to host this tournament wherein the champions of Arakko and Krakoa would fight each other. While Apocalypse led the team of Krakoan champions, Genesis traveled to the other world with her champions and soon found herself in front of her husband. Apocalypse was surprised to see that his wife now wore the golden helm of annihilation, and he later met her again when she told him everything that had gone down on Amet. As the tournament was underway, Apocalypse realized that the scores of Arakko and Krakoa were tied, and he decided to step up and fight for Krakoa against Genesis. Without the golden helm, Genesis was almost able to defeat Apocalypse and even destroy his sword, but her husband took her by surprise and stabbed her in the stomach with the Twilight Sword. While Genesis begged for him to kill her, Annihilation could not let her die, and he regained control over her body and summoned Amnethian forces to the Otherworld in order to conquer Krakoa by other means. While the Amnethian warriors tried to capture Krakoa, the Krakoan champions found allies in the X-Men, Captain Britain Corps, and the Versaka. As the fight continued, Apocalypse removed the helm from his wife's head, leading Annihilation to possess Apocalypse's body instead. However, Apocalypse successfully resisted against the helm and then used it to convince the Amnethian forces to give up. At the end of the fight, Saturnine decided to turn the golden helm into a staff to limit its powers before returning it to Genesis. Saturnine also established that Arakko and Krakoa must exchange prisoners as an act of good faith. In her right as the ruler of Arakko, Genesis later chose Apocalypse to join her in Amneth and represent Krakoa. As the representative of Krakoa, Apocalypse chose Arakko and brought the millions of mutants on Arakko back from their exile in Amneth. He then decided to head to Amneth himself, thereby reuniting with Genesis and their children. What makes Genesis so powerful? Genesis originated from a long life of Okara and mutants and was considered more fit than her husband, the mighty Apocalypse. Just like her family, Genesis was a few thousand years old and she had advanced longevity. While her mutation is not specific in any story arc, she was at least an Omega level mutant with extreme powers. She had the ability to perform chlorokinesis, which enabled her to mentally control plant life around her by manifesting an ancient Egyptian emblem from her hands. Genesis was skilled in sword combat, and she was the only one who managed to defeat Annihilation in a single fight. After claiming the golden helm of Annihilation, Genesis became the new leader of Amneth, but on the condition that she was under Annihilation's possession. She could exert control over Amneth and the thousands of daemons who resided there while also having access to all of Annihilation's powers. Is she going to be the next big threat for the X-Men? XMen Red has been a huge success ever since it debuted last year, and the book follows Storm, Sunspot, and Magneto as they work together as the Brotherhood and try to domesticate the mutants of Arakko and help them merge in society. They want to create a society that could survive outside of the ongoing war with Amneth, and Genesis's return from Amneth turned out to be a bad omen for Arakko. After Apocalypse agreed to ally with the X-Men during the Krakoa era and help them create a mutant nation, he wished to create a path to power for every mutant. However, Genesis had firmer beliefs about mutants and believed that the strong should rule over the weak. She influenced Apocalypse's opinions, and he eventually left his teachings behind and worked hard to create a strong army for them. She even looked down upon Apocalypse for embracing peace and harmony in Krakoa, and in current times, Arakko is at its weakest. Genesis blamed Arakko's weakness on Storm and was of the view that she had created a land so magnificent that only Storm's mismanagement would have led to its downfall. However, Storm desired to establish a stable society in Arakko where mutants could coexist in peace, and this did not sit right with Genesis, who viewed the place as weak and launched an attack along with her children. Even though Storm had faced Genesis in the past, she is not prepared to face Genesis and the first Horsemen in any capacity. While the Arakai have evolved and learned of a life without war, Genesis refuses to accept that they have outgrown her, and this could mean significant losses for the X-Men as Genesis prepares a war that could potentially devastate Arakko forever. Genesis's actions will also put Apocalypse in a position where his loyalty to Krakoa will come into question, and only time will tell if he will join Genesis in war or if she will control him and compel him to side with her. Marvelous verdict. Genesis is probably one of the most influential female mutants in the history of the X-Men universe, and her ability to dominate Apocalypse is a testament to her strength and power. She has bravely stepped up to fight numerous wars for Arakko, and perhaps even against Arakko, in the near future. And we can't wait to see what madness will be unleashed when she declares war on Arakko. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.